Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the most provocative and misunderstood philosophers in history, had a lot to say about morality. Today we're going to dive into one of his most fascinating ideas, that being the distinction between master and slave morality. While nothing with Nietzsche is simply explained, I will do my best here to break this down in the most simplistic manner I possibly can. So stick with me here, because what Nietzsche's saying isn't just about philosophy. It's about how we live our lives, how we create meaning, how we define power, resentment, and values. So let's break that down. So, what exactly does master morality and slave morality mean? Well, first let's clear one thing up. When Nietzsche talks about master and slave morality, he isn't talking about fixed sets of values, like strength is good or meekness is bad. Instead, he is talking about how we decide what is good and what is bad. Essentially, the process of valuing. Here's the story he tells. So, imagine a long time ago when the world was ruled by strong, independent people. These masters, as Nietzsche called them, didn't overthink things. They just lived their lives, decided what mattered to them, and referred to that as good. Strength, pride, and independence? Good. Weakness or pity? Bad. But then, of course, there were the slaves, those who didn't have any power. They were oppressed, and they resented it. And over time, that resentment built up, until eventually something remarkable happened. They started to flip the master's values upside down. Suddenly, what the masters called good, the slaves now called evil. And of course, what the masters called bad, the slaves now called good. Strength became cruelty, pride became arrogance, and meekness, well, that became a virtue. Now, with that being said, let's talk about the key distinction between slave and master morality. Now that we've defined master and slave morality, let's talk a little bit about the key distinctions between the two. To Nietzsche, master morality is active, as he says. It's about creating values from within yourself. It's about looking inward and saying, this is what I believe. This is what I stand for. It's self-defined. Slave morality, on the other hand, is reactive. It doesn't start with, this is what I believe is good. Instead, it starts with, this is what I believe is evil. In essence, it defines itself in opposition to the master's values. So, instead of being self-driven, it's fueled by resentment and reaction. Now, here's where Nietzsche really digs in. He believes resentment, what he calls ressentiment, is one of the most powerful emotions a human can feel. It isn't simply just anger or envy. It's this deep sense of bitterness that comes from feeling powerless. And the fascinating thing that Nietzsche says is that resentment isn't just destructive, it's creative. Slave morality, with its inversion of values, is born out of this resentment. Essentially, the slaves couldn't overthrow their masters physically, so they overthrew them morally. They essentially created a whole new system of values to give themselves power. Not physical power, of course, but moral power. And that's huge. It is the foundation for so much of the morality by which we live by in today's world. So, does Nietzsche think that master morality is good and slave morality is bad? Well, not really. He definitely prefers the active, creative nature of master morality, but he doesn't dismiss slave morality outright. Here's why. Slave morality brought complexity to humanity. It was directly responsible for giving us things like art and science, culture, creative depth, intellectual depth. Without it, we'd still be living in a world of brute force. The masters Nietzsche described weren't philosophers or artists. They were simply strong, powerful people who acted on instinct. It was the slaves, with their resentment and reaction, that introduced a new and greater complexity to humanity. So, what does this mean for you and me? Well, first it's important to understand that we don't live in a world of pure master or slave morality. Over time, these two ways of creating values have blended into the complex moral systems that we live by and have today. But Nietzsche challenges us to ask, how are we creating our values? Are we actively defining what's meaningful to us, or are we simply reacting to what others or society say is good or bad? Are we creating something new, or are we simply stuck in resentment? Stuck in defining ourselves by what we oppose? This is where Nietzsche's message really hits home. He's not telling us to go back to some mythical time of master morality. He's not saying that we should glorify strength or domination. In fact, longing for the past is exactly the kind of reactionary thinking that Nietzsche criticized so much. Instead, Nietzsche challenges us to rise above both master and slave morality. He challenges us to become what he calls the higher type, someone who creates their own values, free from resentment or opposition. Someone who looks inward for meaning and builds something new. So why does any of this really matter? Well, because Nietzsche challenges us to question our own lives, to look at our own lives. Are we creators of meaning, or are we just reacting to what others say? Are you creating your own values, or are you just reacting to someone else's? That is the essence of Nietzsche's challenge. So, the next time you're faced with a moral dilemma, ask yourself this one simple question. Am I creating my own values or just reacting to someone else's? Thanks for watching. If this sparked any thoughts or questions, or you have any suggestions for future videos, please do leave those in the comments below. And thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.